My son looked me straight in the eye and said, "Dad, I sold your house to buy my wife a new Porsche. You have exactly 24 hours to pack your things and get out." I did not scream, I did not cry. I simply smiled, because he did not know that the house had already been sold years ago, and the police were already on their way. I am Conrad Blackwood, 66 years old, and for the last decade my family thought I was just a retired bookkeeper, living on a fixed income. They saw my worn-out cardigans and my 10-year-old sedan, and assumed I was a harmless old man pinching pennies. But before I retired, I was a forensic accountant for the federal government. I spent 30 years hunting down money launderers and corrupt executives who thought they were smarter than the system. I know how to find secrets, and I certainly know how to bury them. Before I tell you how I dismantled my son's life piece by piece, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to ungrateful family members. The sound of my vintage leather suitcase hitting the bottom of the hardwood stairs echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. It was a heavy sound, a final sound. I stood at the top of the landing, looking down. My suitcase, the one I had carried on business trips to Zurich and the Cayman Islands, lay upside down on the foyer floor, scuffed and disrespected. My son. Tyler stood blocking the front door, his arms crossed over his chest. He was 32 years old, wearing a designer suit that I knew he had put on a credit card. Next to him sat his wife, Brittany. She was perched on the hallway bench, scrolling through her phone, her thumb tapping rhythmically against the screen, completely ignoring the fact that her husband had just thrown his father's belongings down a flight of stairs. In Tyler's right hand, he dangled a car key, a Porsche key. It was brand new, the crest catching the light from the chandelier. "Dad, let is be real," Tyler said, his is be real, voice smooth and devoid of any shame. "This Victorian heap is too cramped. The garage is a joke, it barely fits my sedan, let alone the SUV. Brittany needs. Her new Macan arrives on Tuesday, and I am not parking a $90,000 car on the street where it could get scratched." I looked at the crown molding I had restored with my own hands. This house sitting on a prime hill in a wealthy suburb of Seattle was worth $1.8 million. Tyler thought he owned it. He thought he had the right to sell it, because 5 years ago, right before I went in for triple bypass surgery, I signed a power of attorney, giving him control over my assets just in case I did not make it. He did not know that document expired the moment I walked out of the hospital recovery room. And he certainly did not know that the title of this house was not even in my name anymore. Brittany finally looked up from her phone. She pushed her blonde hair back and sighed loudly. "Tyler, hurry it up, we have reservations at Nobu in an hour." Tyler nodded at her, then turned his cold gaze back to me. "We took a deposit on the house this morning. Dad cash buyer. Quick close. They want possession in 48 hours. I used some of the money to book you a room at Sunny Valley. It is paid up for a month. You will like it there. They have bingo and full-time staff to watch you." Sunny Valley was a state-funded nursing home on the other side of the city, notorious for its smell of bleach and boiled cabbage and its indifferent staff. He was discarding me like an old piece of furniture to make room for a luxury car. Most fathers would have yelled. They would have pleaded or cried or asked how their own flesh and blood could be so cruel. But I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same icy focus I used to get when I sat across from a CEO who had just realized I found his offshore accounts. I adjusted my glasses and looked at my watch. It was 4:15 in the afternoon. The banks were closing soon. "You took a deposit," repeated my voice, steady and low. $50,000. Tyler bragged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Non-refundable." The buyer was desperate for the location. "It is done, Dad. Don't to make a scene, just pack your shaving kit and go." He really believed he had won. He believed I was a senile old man who had forgotten about the expiration date on the legal documents. He believed the house was his inheritance to burn. I walked down the stairs. Slowly, my hand gliding over the smooth wood of the banister. I stepped over my suitcase and picked it up, dusting off the leather. I looked my son in the eye. He looked so much like his mother, but he had none of her kindness. He had only her appetite for expensive things. "Okay," I said. Tyler blinked, surprised by how easy it was. He exchanged a confused look with Brittany, who finally put her phone down. "Good." Tyler huffed, puffing out his chest. He tossed the Porsche key into the air and caught it. "The Uber is outside. It will take you straight to the facility. Do not come back here without calling us first. We need our privacy." Opened the heavy oak door. The cool Seattle rain hit my face, smelling of pine and wet asphalt. I turned back one last time, framing them in my memory, like a photograph of a crime scene. "Tyler, with his arrogance, and Brittany with her greed." "Tyler," I said softly, "make sure you keep that deposit receipt somewhere safe." "Why?" he asked, annoyed. "Because you are going to need it when you surrender yourself to the police for fraud." I did not wait for his answer. I closed the door behind me, shutting them into the house they thought was theirs, and I did not get into the Uber. Tyler had called. I walked 2 blocks down the hill to a coffee shop and called a private car 30 minutes later. I was not checking into Sunny Valley. I was walking into the marble lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. The concierge, a man who had known me for 20 years, nodded discreetly. "Welcome back, Mr. Blackwood. The presidential suite is ready for you, as always." I handed him my black titanium credit card. The one with the limitless ceiling. The one Tyler did not know existed. "Thank you, James." Once I was in the room overlooking the gray waters of the Puget Sound, I poured myself a glass of single malt scotch. I stood by the window watching the ferries cut through the water. I took a sip, letting the burn settle in my chest. Then I pulled out my encrypted phone and dialed a number I had not used in 3 years. "Wainwright," I said. When the voice on the other end answered, "It is Conrad, Mr. Blackwood." The lawyer's voice was crisp, sharp as a razor. "It has been a long time. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Initiate Phase 1, I said, looking at my reflection in the glass. "Freeze the trust fund, and Wainwright. Get the fraud unit on the line. My son just sold a house that belongs to a charitable trust. He took a $50,000 deposit. I want you to make sure that when he wakes up tomorrow morning, he realizes that money is the most expensive thing he ever touched." I hung up the phone and sat in the velvet armchair. Tyler and Brittany were probably popping champagne right now, celebrating their victory, laughing about the old man rotting in a nursing home. They were planning which color leather seats to get for the Porsche. They had no idea that I wasn't just a retired bookkeeper. They had no idea that tomorrow morning, when they walked into the title office to sign the final papers, they were walking straight into a trap I had set 3 years ago. The game had just begun, and I had never lost a game in my life. The champagne cork popped with a sound that echoed through the security camera feed on my iPad screen. From the comfort of my suite at the Four Seasons, I watched my living room turn into a nightclub. It had been less than 3 hours since I walked out the door, and my son Tyler was already celebrating the erasure of his father. He had invited a dozen friends over, the kind of people who wear sunglasses indoors and talk loudly about businesses that never seem to launch. They were drinking the 50-year-old scotch I had been saving for Tyler's wedding day, passing the bottle around like it was cheap beer. Tyler stood in the center of the room, flushed and sweating, holding court. "To everyone here tonight," he shouted, raising a glass that used to belong to his grandmother. "To new beginnings. The dead weight is gone and the McCann is coming tomorrow." The room erupted in cheers. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, sipping my tea, watching my son toast to my eviction. It was fascinating in a morbid way, like watching a car crash in slow motion. He truly believed the money from the house sale was his. He believed the $50,000 deposit was just the appetizer. But the real show was happening in the corner. Brittany was holding her phone up the ring light, reflecting in her eyes, broadcasting live to her 3,000 followers. I tapped on her profile, and joined the stream anonymously. "Hey guys," she chirped, doing a little spin that showed off the crown molding of my foyer. "So, big update. We finally got the house. Like fully ours. We had to move some things around, specifically a very grumpy, very old obstacle who just wouldn't let us live our truth." She walked through the hallway, pointing the camera at my library. "We are going to gut this whole room," she said, wrinkling her nose. "It smells like mothballs and depression in here. We're thinking a home gym or maybe a content studio. And the best part? The toxic energy is gone. We sent him to a facility where he can be with his own kind. It is honestly a relief. We deserve this space. We deserve to breathe." I watched the comments roll in on her screen. "So happy for you, Queen. You deserve it. Toxic family is the worst." Toxic. That was the word she used to describe the man who paid for her student loans anonymously so she wouldn't start her marriage in debt. The man who covered their rent for 3 years under the guise of a housing grant so Tyler wouldn't feel like a failure. I turned off the iPad. I had seen enough. The anger I expected to feel wasn't there. Instead, there was a clarity sharp and cold as a scalpel. They were celebrating a victory on a battlefield they didn't even realize was mined. I picked up the secure line in the hotel room and dialed Wainwright. It was late, but Wainwright didn't sleep. He was a shark in a suit, and sharks are always moving. "We are live," Conrad Wainwright answered on the first ring. I looked out at the city lights of Seattle rain streaking against the glass. "Wainwright, initiate the freeze on the Blackwood Trust. Section 4, Paragraph C, moral turpitude and gross misconduct." There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. "You are triggering the nuclear option, Conrad. You know what this means. Once I lock it down, he loses the monthly stipend, the emergency access, the health insurance, and the future inheritance vesting. He will be destitute within 48 hours. I thought about the Scotch bottle being passed around my living room. I thought about Brittany calling me a grumpy obstacle. "Do it," I said softly. "And Wainwright, make sure the notification hits his email tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, just as he is walking into the title-off office to sign the closing papers. I want him to feel the ground open up underneath him." "Understood," Wainwright said. "The account is frozen effective immediately. The $2 million in his name is now inaccessible." I hung up the phone. Tyler didn't know about the $2 million. He knew he got a monthly allowance from a generic trust fund that I told him was left by a distant relative. He thought it was free money, a lucky break. He didn't know I was the trustee. He didn't know I was the source. I had set up that trust 10 years ago, burying the money deep in a complex web of LLCs to protect him from himself. I knew my son. I knew he was weak, easily manipulated, and prone to gambling. I wanted to ensure he would always have a safety net, food on the table, a roof over his head. But I included a clause, a kill switch, designed for the exact moment he decided to bite the hand that fed him. If the beneficiary engages in criminal activity, fraud, or actions that endanger the trustee, the assets revert to the principal charity. By forging my signature on a power of attorney and selling a house that didn't belong to him, Tyler had just violated every condition of his own safety net. I walked to the minibar and grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. On the screen, the party was winding down. Tyler was slumped on my leather sofa, looking at his phone, probably checking the tracking status of the Porsche. He looked so confident, so sure of his place in the world. He thought he was the king of the castle. He didn't know he was just a squatter in a house owned by a charity, spending money he no longer had, waiting for a car he couldn't pay for. The night was quiet in the hotel. The sheets were crisp and clean. I laid down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was going to be a very long day for my son. He was going to walk into a lawyer's office expecting a check for $1.8 million. Instead, he was going to find out that his father wasn't a retired bookkeeper. He was going to find out that the man he threw out like trash was the only thing standing between him and total ruin. And the worst part for him, he had already spent the deposit money. I closed my eyes and slept like a baby, while across town my son drank to a future that had already been canceled. The morning rain in Seattle washed over the city in gray sheets, but it did nothing to dampen the feverish energy consuming my son Tyler and his wife Brittany. They left my house at 8:30 in the morning, driving fast, aggressively, weaving through the commuter traffic on I-5 toward the downtown law offices of the buyer. They were running on adrenaline and the fumes of a victory they had not actually won. I was already awake, sitting in the velvet armchair of my hotel suite, finishing a pot of Earl Grey tea, watching the GPS tracker on Tyler's phone move across the map on my iPad. It was a little trick I had installed months ago when he started asking suspicious questions about my life insurance policies. Forensic accounting teaches you that people always leave a trail and desperate people leave highways. Tyler wasn't just selling my house to buy a car. That was the story for Brittany. The truth was darker and much more urgent. Tyler had a gambling problem. A $60,000 problem with a bookie in Vegas who had given him until Friday to pay up or face consequences that didn't involve lawyers. The sale of my house was his lifeline. The $50,000 deposit he took yesterday was supposed to be the first payment to keep his legs intact. But Brittany didn't know about the bookie. She only knew about the Porsche. McCann waiting at the dealership. So while Tyler drove with sweaty palms thinking about saving his skin, Brittany sat in the passenger seat, dreaming of leather interiors, having already wired the entire $50,000 deposit to the dealership as a non-refundable down payment to expedite delivery. They were walking into a buzzsaw. I wasn't in the room with them, but I didn't need to be. I had the transcript later from the buyer's attorney. A man named Mr. Roth who had no patience for amateurs or fraudsters. Tyler walked into the conference room of Roth and Associates like he owned the building. He threw his briefcase onto the mahogany table and flashed a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Brittany sat next to him, checking her watch, visibly annoyed that this administrative trivia was delaying her car pickup. "Let's make this quick," Tyler said, smoothing his tie. "We have a busy day. The house is empty. The old man is gone. We are ready to sign over the title and collect the remaining balance." Mr. Roth sat at the head of the table, silent. He was a man who charged $800 an hour, and he looked at Tyler with the expression one might reserve for a stain on a silk rug. Next to him sat the buyer, a developer named Mr. Liu, who looked less than impressed. Mr. Blackwood, Roth began, his voice dry as dust. "We have run the title search on the property at 442 Skyline Drive. There seems to be a significant discrepancy." Tyler waved his hand dismissively. "Look, if it is about the property tax adjustments, just take it out of the final payout. My father was getting sloppy in his old age." "We just want the check," Brittany chimed in, snapping her gum. "Yes, please, we have an appointment at the dealership at 11. Can we skip the small talk?" Roth opened a thick file folder and slid a single piece of paper across the polished table. "It wasn't a check, it was a copy of a deed. You seem to be under the impression, Mr. Blackwood, that you have the authority to sell this home," Roth said, leaning back. "You provided us with a power of attorney, signed by your father, 5 years ago." "Correct," Tyler said, his confidence wavering slightly, just for a fraction of a second. "It gives me full control over his assets, in case of incapacity or for his benefit. He is in a home now. It is for his benefit." Roth didn't blink. "That document is interesting, but it is irrelevant. You see, you cannot sell what your father does not own." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The hum of the air conditioning unit seemed to roar in the quiet. Tyler frowned, a nervous bead of sweat breaking out on his forehead. "What are you talking about?" "My dad built that house. He has lived there for 30 years. "Of course he owns it." "Incorrect," Roth said, his voice dropping an octave, dropping the hammer. "Conrad Blackwood transferred the ownership of the property 3 years ago. The current legal owner of the house is the Blackwood Charitable Trust, an irrevocable trust dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud." Tyler froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the paper on the table, staring at the words. He couldn't comprehend. Owner of record Blackwood. Charitable trust, but Tyler stammered, his face draining of color. But I live there, he lives there. Mr. Roth adjusted his glasses. Your father retains a life estate. This means he has the legal right to inhabit the property until his death. Upon his passing, the property is liquidated and the proceeds go entirely to charity. He owns the right to live there, Mr. Blackwood. He does not own the bricks, he does not own the land, and he certainly does not have the right to sell it, and neither do you. Brittany stopped. Brittany, chewing her gum, looked from the lawyer to her husband, her eyes widening in horror. Tyler, what is he talking about? You said this was our inheritance. You said the house was ours. Tyler ignored her. He stood up, his hands shaking, slamming them onto the table. There must be a mistake. He is senile. He probably didn't know what he was signing. I can contest this. I am his son. You can contest nothing, Roth said, standing up to match Tyler's height. And frankly, Mr. Blackwood, the title is the least of your problems right now. Mr. Liu, the buyer, stood up as well. His face was red with anger. You took a $50,000 deposit from me yesterday. You signed a contract guaranteeing you had the clear title. You committed fraud. We want our money back. Roth said, his voice cutting like a knife. Immediately. The deal is dead. We are not buying a house from a trust that isn't selling. We want the $50,000 cashier's check returned right now, or we are calling the district attorney. The room seemed to shrink around Tyler. He looked at Brittany, desperation clawing at his throat. Brittany, give them the money back. We have to fix this. We will figure something out later. Just give them the deposit. Brittany shrank back in her chair, clutching her designer handbag, her face a mask of pure terror. Tyler, can't. What do you mean you can't? Tyler screamed, panic taking over his voice. Just write them a check, transfer it back. I sent it to the dealership this morning. Brittany whispered, her voice trembling. It was a non-refundable deposit on the McCann. They insisted on it to hold the car because of the custom color. It is gone, Tyler. The money is gone. The sound of Tyler's heart breaking must have been audible in the hallway. He slumped back into his chair, defeated, crushed under the weight of his own greed and his wife's stupidity. $50,000 gone in less than 24 hours. Mr. Roth picked up his phone. He didn't look at Tyler, he looked at the buyer. Mr. Liu, I am calling the police. This is wire fraud and grand larceny involving a real estate transaction. The amount exceeds the felony threshold. Wait, Tyler begged, tears forming in his eyes. Please, we can fix this. My dad has money, he will cover it. He always covers it. Just give me an hour, let me call him. Mr. Roth paused, his finger hovering over the dial button. You have 1 hour. If that money is not in our escrow account, by noon we are filing charges. And Mr. Blackwood, do not leave this building. Security is in the lobby. Tyler and Brittany scrambled out of the conference room into the hallway, terrified like rats trapped in a maze. Tyler pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking so badly he dropped it once before dialing my number. I watched the call come in on my secure line in the hotel room. Son. The caller ID read. I took a sip of my tea, enjoying the warmth. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. I could imagine the scene in that hallway, Tyler sweating, facing jail time, facing the bookie who wanted his legs, facing a wife who had spent their bail money on a car they would never drive. They were alone, completely and utterly alone for the first time in their lives. Tyler had relied on my safety net for 32 years. He thought it was an infinite resource. He didn't realize that safety nets are for people who fall, not for people who push their fathers off the ledge. I checked my email. A notification from Wainwright popped up. Trust fund, frozen, phase 1, complete. Tyler was about to find out that not only was the house not his, but the monthly allowance that paid for his sushi dinners and designer suits had just evaporated. He was standing on the precipice of ruin, and I was the one who had greased the edge. I put my phone down and ordered room service, a club sandwich, and a glass of champagne. The show was just getting started, and I had a front-row seat to the dismantling of my son's ego. They weren't going to go to jail today. I knew that Roth was frightening them, but he wanted the money more than he wanted justice. Tyler would find a way to stall. He always did, but the seed of panic had been planted. They were cornered, desperate and broke, and desperate people make mistakes. Tyler would try to find me. He would come hunting for the father. He discarded, hoping I would write a check to make the bad men go away. He would try to gaslight me to play the victim. But he was going to find a very different Conrad Blackwood than the one he knew. The checkbook was closed, the bank was shut, and the forensic accountant was back on the job, ready to audit his son's life, down to the last lie. Tyler and Brittany did not go home to pack their bags or call a lawyer to beg for mercy. Instead, they sat in their car outside the title office and rewrote reality to suit their desperation. Brittany was the architect of this delusion, twisting the facts until they fit her narrative. She grabbed Tyler's face, forcing him to look at her, panic and greed mixing in her eyes. "Your father has lost his mind," she hissed, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "Think about it, Tyler. He gave a nearly $2 million house to a charity nobody has ever heard of. He is senile. He was probably tricked into signing those papers by some scam artist lawyer. This is elder abuse, Tyler. We are the victims here. We have to save him from himself, and we have to get that house back." Tyler nodded slowly, the desperation in his eyes finding a convenient anchor. He didn't want to be the son who stole from his father. He wanted to be the hero, saving his confused dad. He latched onto the lie like a drowning man grabbing a piece of driftwood. "You are right," he muttered. "He is confused. That is why he left. That is why he is hiding. We have to find him. We have to get him to sign a revocation of that trust before he spends all our money." They tracked me down in less than an hour. It wasn't difficult. I hadn't exactly hidden my tracks. I wanted them to find me. I wanted this confrontation to happen on my turf, under my rules. Was sitting in the lobby lounge of the Four Seasons enjoying a pot of Earl Grey tea and reading the Wall Street Journal. When the revolving doors spun open and chaos walked in, Brittany led the charge. Her mascara was smudged, but her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She spotted me across the room and immediately launched into a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Oh, thank God," she screamed, rushing past the concierge, causing heads to turn at every table. "There he is, Dad. We have been so worried about you." She ran toward me, her heels clacking loudly on the marble floor. Tyler followed close behind, looking less like a concerned son and more like a man who owed $60,000 to people who break kneecaps. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I simply turned the page of my newspaper and took a sip of tea. The calmness of my demeanor seemed to infuriate Brittany even more. She stopped right in front of my table, her chest heaving, putting on a show for the wealthy patrons watching us. "How could you run off like that?" she wailed loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "You are sick, Conrad. You are not thinking clearly. We went to the house and you were gone. You scared us half to death." She was playing the angle perfectly. The dutiful daughter-in-law chasing down the dementia-ridden patriarch, hoping the onlookers would see a tragedy instead of a robbery. Tyler stepped forward, trying to look authoritative. "Dad, come on. Let's go home. We know you didn't mean to sign away the house. We know you are confused. We are going to take you to a doctor and fix this mess." I folded my newspaper slowly, placing it on the table next to the silver teapot. I looked at Tyler, then at Brittany, the silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. The hotel security guard had taken a step forward, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand, signaling that I was fine. "I am not confused, Tyler," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I am certainly not sick." Brittany scoffed, crossing her arms. "You gave our inheritance to a charity." "Conrad, only a crazy person does that." "You were manipulated. We are going to sue that lawyer and get power of attorney over you immediately for your own protection." "For my protection?" I repeated, testing the weight of the words. "Yes," Tyler insisted. "We need to manage your assets. You are obviously not capable anymore. Look at you spending money on a five-star hotel when you are on a fixed income. You are burning through your savings. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a wallet or a checkbook. I pulled out a thick manila envelope I had prepared it weeks ago, updating it with fresh data just yesterday. Forensic accounting isn't just about numbers, it is about behavior. It is about tracking the flow of desire and vice. I slid the envelope across the polished table toward them. It stopped right next to Brittany's designer handbag. "Sit down," I commanded. The authority in my voice wasn't the voice of a retired father. It was the voice of a man who used to interrogate embezzlers for a living. They hesitated, but something in my eyes made them obey. They sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, looking at the envelope with suspicion. "Open it," I said, taking another sip of tea. Tyler reached out his hand, shaking, and opened the clasp. He pulled out the first stack of photographs. The color drained from his face faster than water down a drain. The first photo was grainy but clear. It showed Tyler sitting at a high-stakes blackjack table at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. The date stamp was from 3 months ago, the night he told me he was at a business conference in Portland. The next photo showed him shaking hands with a man known to law enforcement as Vinny the Shark, a loan shark with a rap sheet. "As long as my arm, you have a gambling problem, Tyler," I said quietly. "You have lost $60,000 in the last 6 months. You have drained your own savings, maxed out your credit cards, and now you are selling my house to pay off Vinny because he threatened to break your legs." Tyler looked up at me, terror swimming in his eyes. "Dad, I can explain." I held up a hand, stopping him. "I haven't finished." Brittany snatched the envelope from Tyler, sneering. "This is ridiculous. So he likes to play cards." "That doesn't mean you can steal our house. Keep looking, Brittany," I said. "Look at the second stack." She pulled out the next set of photos, and her sneer vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. The photos showed Brittany not at her weekly Pilates class, but entering a Motel 6 on the outskirts of town, walking hand in hand with a man who was definitely not Tyler. The man was 24 years old, a personal trainer named Marcus. The timestamps were undeniable. Tuesday afternoons, Thursday mornings. The same time she claimed she was helping her sick mother. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that only they could hear. "I spent 30 years tracking money for the federal government. Did you really think I wouldn't track my own family when things started not adding up? I know about the debt, Tyler, and I know about Marcus." Brittany. Tyler snatched the photos from Brittany's hand. He stared at the image of his wife kissing another man in a motel parking lot. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The narrative they had built, the united front against the senile old man, crumbled into dust in seconds. Tyler stammered, looking at his wife. "You said you were with your mom." Brittany turned pale, stammering, trying to find a lie that would fit, but the evidence was glossy and high resolution. In her husband's hands, I continued, my voice relentless. "I know that you applied for a platinum credit card in my name last week." Brittany intercepted the mail to hide it. "I know you tried to access my retirement accounts online, but failed the security questions. I know everything." I took a sip of tea, watching them destroy each other. With their eyes, the lobby of the Four Seasons was quiet, civil, elegant. In the middle of it, my son and his wife were realizing that their entire lives were built on a foundation of sand, and I had just washed it away. "This is what is going to happen," I said, putting my teacup down. "You are going to leave this hotel quietly. You are not going to scream. You are not going to claim I am crazy, and you are certainly not going to sue anyone for the house but Dad." Tyler whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Vinny, he is going to kill me if I don't pay him." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said coldly. "A problem you should have thought about before you tried to evict your father." I looked at Brittany, who was trembling, clutching her purse as if it contained the last shred of her dignity. And you, I said to her, you are going to stop posting about me on social media. You are going to stop telling people I am a burden. Because if I see one more video, one more comment, I will send these photos to every single person on your friends list, and then I will send them to your divorce lawyer. Tyler looked at Brittany with a mixture of hatred and heartbreak. He had lost his house, his money, and now he knew his marriage was a sham. You have two choices, I said, leaning back in my chair. Option A. You walk out of here right now and figure out your own mess. Option B. You stay and keep making a scene, and I hand this entire file over to the fraud unit of the police department alongside the report for the credit card identity theft. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the primal fear of survival. They stood up shaky and defeated. Tyler wouldn't even look at Brittany. He walked toward the revolving doors, his head hanging low. Brittany scrambled after him, shooting one last look of venom at me before disappearing into the rainy Seattle afternoon. I watched them go, feeling a strange hollowness in my chest. It wasn't happiness, it was the satisfaction of a job well done, of a balance sheet corrected. But it was tragic to see my own son reduced to this, a man so consumed by greed, he didn't realize he was sleeping next to a traitor. I signaled the waiter for the check. My tea had gone cold. They were gone, but I knew it wasn't over. Desperate people do desperate things. Tyler was cornered by the loan shark, and Brittany was cornered by her lies. They wouldn't give up that easily. They would panic, and when people panic, they double down. I needed to be ready for the next move. The house was safe for now, but they needed money, and they needed it fast. They would try something bolder, something reckless. I checked my watch. It was almost 5 p.m. I had a meeting with the security consultant regarding the locks on the Victorian house. They might try to break in squatters' rights. We're a messy business in this state. I stood up, buttoning my jacket, feeling the weight of the years, but also the strength of the truth. I was Conrad Blackwood, and I was done being the victim. My son thought he was playing a game of checkers. I was playing three-dimensional chess, and I was 5 moves ahead. The silence in my hotel room was shattered, not by a phone call, but by the vibration of my smartwatch, alerting me to a perimeter breach at the Victorian house security system. I had installed a silent alarm months ago. The kind that sends a notification but doesn't trigger a siren. Tyler and Brittany were back at the house, but they weren't packing. They were staging a scene. I sat in the high-back chair of the hotel suite watching the live feed on my tablet. Tyler looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the living room, while Brittany paced back and forth, chewing on her thumbnail until it bled. They were desperate. The $50,000 deposit was gone, lost to the car dealership that was now threatening legal action for breach of contract, and the buyer. Mr. Liu had given them a 24-hour deadline before filing felony fraud charges. Desperation makes people stupid, but it also makes them dangerous. I watched as a third person entered the frame. A man I recognized instantly, not from my personal life, but from a dossier I had compiled years ago during a medical fraud investigation. Dr. Richard Evans. He wasn't a family practitioner. He was a psychiatrist for hire, a man who had lost his hospital privileges 3 years ago for overprescribing opioids and now ran a cash-only clinic in a strip mall. I turned up the volume on the hidden microphone in the living room. "Are you sure this will work?" Tyler asked, his voice shaking. He was holding a glass of whiskey, his hand trembling so hard, the ice clinked against the glass. Dr. Evans set a black medical bag on the coffee table. "It will work if you stick to the script. The diagnosis is retroactive. Dementia. We will claim that 3 years ago, when your father transferred the house to the trust, he was already suffering from cognitive decline, hallucinating, and unable to understand the consequences of his actions. If a medical professional certifies he was incompetent at the time of signing, the transfer is void. The house reverts to him, and as his legal guardians, you take control." Brittany stopped pacing, "But he seems fine. He just humiliated us in a hotel lobby. He was sharp. Evans smiled a greasy, unpleasant smile. That is the beauty of this condition, Brittany. It comes and goes, we call it lucidity masking. But tonight, we are going to induce a psychotic break, or at least something that looks like one. When the paramedics arrive, he will be incoherent, aggressive, and confused. I will sign the involuntary commitment papers. You will get temporary guardianship within 48 hours. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was a calculated assault on my freedom. They were planning to chemical lobotomize me to get their hands on a house that didn't even belong to them. My phone rang. It was Tyler. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice calm. "Hello, Tyler, Dad," Tyler said, his voice dropping into a register of fake concern. "Listen, we are sorry about the hotel. We were just stressed. Look, we found something Mom left for you. It was in the attic behind some insulation. It looks like her old jewelry box. We didn't want to open it. We thought you should come get it." He was using my dead wife as bait. It was low even for him. I don't think that is a good idea. "Tyler," I said, playing the part of the hesitant old man, "I should stay here." "Please, Dad," Brittany chimed in on me. The speakerphone. "We want to make peace. We cooked dinner. Just come over, get the box, and we can talk like a family. No lawyers, no fighting. Just us." I looked at the screen. Dr. Evans was mixing a clear liquid into a glass of water on the sideboard. "Okay," I said. "I will be there in 30 minutes. I hung up and stood up. I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going there to put the final nail in their coffin. I reached into my suitcase and pulled out a small device the size of a button. It was a high-fidelity recorder with a direct cloud upload feature. I taped it to the inside of my shirt collar. I checked the GPS tracker in my shoe. I sent a text to Wainwright. "Phase 2 is active. They have Dr. Evans. Keep the line open." I took a cab to the house. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. The house loomed on the hill, dark except for the living room lights. I walked up the steps, the same steps my suitcase had been thrown down yesterday, and unlocked the door. The atmosphere inside was thick with tension. Tyler was standing by the fireplace, sweating. Brittany was sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dr. Evans was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in the kitchen or the study. "Waiting for his cue, Dad," Tyler said, forcing a smile. "You came." "Where is the box, Tyler?" I asked, staying near the door, keeping my hand on the knob. "Come sit down first," Brittany said, patting the cushion next to her. "You look tired, Conrad. Let me get you some water." She stood up and walked to the sideboard, picking up the glass. I had seen Evans spike moments ago. She brought it to me with a steady hand, looking me right in the eye. "Here, drink this. It will help you relax." I took the glass. The water looked clear, innocent. But I knew it was loaded with a sedative strong enough to knock out a horse or make a forensic accountant look like a raving lunatic. I held the glass, looking at the condensation forming on the rim. "So this is how we make peace?" I asked. "Is this the olive branch?" Tyler stepped closer, blocking the path to the door. "Just drink the water, Dad. We need to talk about the house again." "You are confused. You have been confused for a long time. We just want to help you fix your mistake." "I am not confused, Tyler," I said, my voice hardening. "I transferred that house to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. From your gambling. From her spending." Tyler's face twisted, the mask slipped. "You are senile, old man. You gave away our future to a charity. You weren't thinking straight. Dr. Evans says you have been sick for years, and there it was, the cue." Dr. Evans stepped out of the hallway, shadows wearing a white coat that looked like a costume. "Hello, Conrad," he said, his voice oily and patronizing. "I am Dr. Evans, Tyler. Asked me to stop by and check on you. He says you have been having episodes." I looked at Evans, then at Tyler. "Who is this clown? He is a specialist," Brittany snapped, dropping the act. "Drink the water, Conrad." You are agitated. You are having an episode right now. They were closing. In Tyler moved to my left, Evans to my right. They were trying to corral me to force the narrative. I realized then that they weren't going to let me leave. They needed me incapacitated before the morning. They needed a medical emergency to override the legal documents. I raised the glass to my lips. My hand trembled not from fear, but from adrenaline. I needed them to think they had won. I needed them to confess everything while the tape was rolling. I took a sip. A small one. I held the liquid under my tongue, letting the bitter chemical taste burn the soft tissue. But I didn't swallow. I feigned a swallow, gulping loudly. Good, Brittany said, watching me like a hawk. Drink it all. I took another fake sip, then staggered slightly, leaning against the wall. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, spilling the poisoned water everywhere. What is in that? I slurred, letting my eyelids droop. Just something to help you sleep, Dad, Tyler said, grabbing my arm to steady me. You are going to sleep for a long time, and when you wake up, we will be in charge. Everything is going to be better. I let my legs buckle, Tyler, and Evans caught me, dragging me toward the sofa. I let my head loll back. My eyes fluttering shut. He is going down, Evans said, checking my pulse fast. Get the restraints ready. We need him tied down before the ambulance gets here. We need it to look like he was violent. Restraints. They were going to tie me up in my own home. I lay on the sofa, keeping my body limp. I heard the sound of zip ties being pulled from a bag. I felt Tyler grab my wrists, pulling them together. Do it, Evans hissed. Make it tight. We need marks. We need to show that he was struggling, hurting himself. This is crazy, Brittany whispered, her voice trembling. Is he out? Is he asleep? He is out, Evans said, checking my eyelids roughly. That dose would knock out an elephant. He won't remember a thing, even if he wakes up now. Listen to me carefully. When the police arrive, you tell them he attacked you. You tell them he was screaming about people stealing his house, that he didn't know who you were. I will sign the 51 on 50. Hold. We ship him to St. Jude's psych ward tonight. By Monday, I will have the retroactive capacity evaluation done. The trust will be voided, and the house, Tyler asked, the greed leaking back into his voice. The house is yours, Evans confirmed. Once the trust is void, you are the next of kin. The power of attorney reactivates. You can sell it on Tuesday, and the money. Brittany asked, $50,000 for me, as agreed, Evans said, cash. From the sale proceeds, $50,000 to steal a man's life, to erase his sanity. I lay there listening to them. Divide up the spoils of my destruction. I felt the plastic zip tie dig into my wrist. Tyler was pulling it tight, hurting me intentionally, my own son. The boy I taught to ride a bike, the boy I carried to bed when he fell asleep on the couch, was now binding my hands to steal a house he didn't earn. I waited. I counted the seconds. The recorder on my chest was capturing every word, every breath, every conspiracy. But I needed one more thing. I needed to know about the other debts. I needed to know how deep the hole was. Why the rush, Tyler? I mumbled, slurring my words heavily, pretending to drift in and out. Why tonight? Tyler leaned over me, his breath smelling of stale whiskey, because Vinny gave me 24 hours, Dad. If I don't pay him by tomorrow night, he is sending guys to the house, he said. He is going to take a finger for every 10,000 I owe. I am not losing my fingers because you decided to be a philanthropist. There it was, the motive, the deadline, the threat. I stopped fighting the zip ties. I went completely limp, letting my breathing shallow out. He is under, Evans said. Step back. Let the drugs do the work. Call 911. Tell them your father has snapped. Brittany pulled out her phone. I could hear her punch in the numbers. Her voice changed instantly, shifting into a hysterical sob. Please help my father-in-law. He is going crazy. He is attacking us. He has a knife. Please hurry. A knife. She was planting a weapon now. I heard her walk into the kitchen, rummaging through the drawers. She came back, and I felt something cold and metal being pressed into my limp hand. It was my favorite carving knife, the one I used for Sunday roasts. She wrapped my fingers around the handle, wiping her own prints off with a cloth. "There," she whispered. "He is armed, now it is self-defense." I lay there, my eyes closed, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of pure rage. They had crossed the line from fraud to frame up. They were willing to have me shot by the police to get their money. But they had made one critical mistake. They assumed the water I drank was the only thing I had in my system. They didn't know about the caffeine pills I had taken before I came over, keeping my mind razor sharp. They didn't know that I hadn't swallowed the sedative. I had spit it into the handkerchief in my pocket when I pretended to cough as they dragged me to the sofa, and most importantly, they didn't know that Wainwright wasn't just a lawyer. He was listening to the live feed from the recorder, and he had already called the police 5 minutes before. Brittany did. I heard sirens in the distance, getting louder. Tyler paced the room. "They are coming. Stick to the story. He has dementia. He is violent." We were scared for our lives. I waited. The sirens stopped outside. Heavy boots hit the porch. The door burst open. "Police!" "Drop the weapon," a voice roared. I didn't move. I let the knife slip from my fingers, clattering to the floor. "Is over there," Brittany screamed, playing the victim. "He tried to kill us." Officers rushed the room. I felt hands checking me. "Checking the restraints. He is unconscious," one officer said. "Checking vitals." I opened my eyes, snapping them open, clear and alert. I looked directly at the officer. A sergeant I recognized from the fraud seminars I used to teach. "Hello, Sergeant Miller," I said, my voice crisp and completely sober. "I believe you have a warrant for these 3 people?" The room went dead silent. Tyler's jaw dropped. Dr. Evans looked at the empty glass, then at me, his face draining of color. "Mr. Blackwood," Sergeant Miller said, surprised. "You are okay. I am perfectly fine, Sergeant," I said, sitting up and ripping the loose zip tie from my wrist. Tyler hadn't tightened it properly. His hands were shaking too much. I spit out the sedative. But I did record the last 20 minutes of this conversation, including the part where they agreed to pay Dr. Evans $50,000 to falsify my medical records, and the part where my daughter-in-law planted a knife in my hand. I tapped the button on my collar. Stopping the recording, Tyler looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see an old man. He saw the prosecutor. He saw the judge. He saw the end. "Dad," he whispered. "Don't call me Dad." I stood up, smoothing my jacket. "You just tried to have me lobotomized, Tyler. You aren't my son anymore. You are just a suspect." Sergeant Miller looked at Tyler, then at Evans. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch. Send backup. We have a conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. I need detectives on scene now." Brittany tried to run. She bolted for the back door, but a uniformed officer caught her by the arm. She started screaming, blaming Tyler, blaming Evans, screaming that she was pregnant, that she was just a girl. I watched them scrambling, turning on each other like rats in a bucket. The game was over. The trap had snapped shut, and I was the only one walking out of that house a free man. Family court is not a place of justice. It is a theater of cruelty where the best liar usually wins, and my son Tyler was putting on the performance of a lifetime. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded calmly on the polished wood, watching the flesh of my flesh try to strip me of my human rights. It was 9 in the morning, less than 12 hours after the incident at the house. Tyler had moved with terrifying speed, filing an emergency ex parte motion for temporary guardianship. He claimed I was an immediate danger to myself and others, he claimed. The incident with the knife was a psychotic break caused by untreated dementia. The courtroom was cold, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked down at the paperwork Tyler's lawyer had just submitted. It was a mountain of lies printed on legal bond paper. Your Honor, Tyler's lawyer began a slick man named Mr. Sterling, who specialized in elder law disputes. We are not doing this lightly. Mr. Tyler Blackwood is devastated. He loves his father deeply, but the events of the last 48 hours have made it clear that Conrad Blackwood has lost his grip on reality. He is spending thousands of dollars on luxury hotels. He thinks he is a secret agent conducting investigations. And last night, he pulled a knife on his own son, Tyler, sat behind his lawyer, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent manufactured sobs. He was wearing a modest gray suit, not the flashy designer one from yesterday. He looked humble. He looked like a grieving son trying to save his dad. I looked at Wainwright sitting next to me. My lawyer was stone-faced. He scribbled something on his legal pad. Let them talk. Let them hang themselves, Judge. Harrison looked at me. Mr. Blackwood, your son claims you are suffering from acute paranoia. Is it true you checked into the Four Seasons 2 days ago? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice clear. And is it true you have been recording your family? The judge frowned. It wasn't the answer she wanted. She wanted a denial. She wanted a fight. My honesty seemed to unsettle her. The lawyer called Brittany to the stand. She walked up the aisle wearing a simple cardigan and no makeup, looking pale and fragile. She sat down and dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. Mrs. Blackwood, tell the court what happened. Brittany took a shaky breath. It has been getting worse for months. He forgets who we are. He calls me by his dead wife's name. He leaves the stove on. He wanders the Almstung neighborhood at night, talking to people who aren't there, lies. All of it, but she said it with such conviction, such tearful sincerity that half the room probably believed her. And the money, the lawyer asked, he is burning it, she whispered, sounding horrified. He thinks he is a millionaire. He spends money we don't have on things he doesn't need. We found receipts for expensive dinners, gadgets, surveillance equipment. He is draining his retirement savings. We tried to stop him. We tried to help him budget. But he gets so aggressive. He throws things. He yells. She looked at me, and for a second her mask slipped, just enough for me to see the malice underneath last night. She continued, her voice trembling. He lured us to the house. He was ranting about trust funds and conspiracies. He had a knife, Your Honor. He pointed it at Tyler's chest. He said he was going to cut us out. He didn't know who we were. He looked at us like strangers. It was the scariest moment of my life. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at me with pity and concern. Brittany's performance was flawless. She painted a picture of a tragic decline, a man consumed by the shadows of his own mind. If I didn't know who I was, I might have believed her myself. Then came the heavy artillery. The lawyer called Dr. Richard Evans. Evans walked to the stand with the confidence of a man who had done this 100 times. He carried a thick medical file under his arm. He adjusted his tie, swore to tell the truth, and sat down, looking every bit the concerned medical professional. Evans. You have treated Mr. Blackwood, yes, for 3 years. Evans lied smoothly. And what is your diagnosis? Rapid onset dementia with paranoid delusions. Evans opened the file, pointing to charts that he had forged overnight. The patient exhibits classic symptoms. Confabulation, where he invents complex stories to fill gaps in his memory. Aggression and financial irresponsibility. He believes he was a high-level government accountant. The truth is, he was a bookkeeper. But in his mind, he is a hero fighting corruption. It is a coping mechanism for his cognitive decline. He believes he was a high-level government accountant. The lie was clever. It took the truth of my life and twisted it into a symptom. It made my skills, my history, my very identity sound like the ravings of a madman. Is he competent to manage his own affairs? The lawyer asked. Absolutely not. Evans said, grave and serious, he is a danger to his estate and his physical safety. The incident with the knife confirms an escalation. If he is not placed under immediate guardianship, he could hurt someone or leave himself destitute within weeks. I recommend immediate placement in a secure facility where he can receive 24-hour care. The judge nodded slowly, making notes. She looked at the file Evans had presented. It looked official. It had dates, signatures, prescription records, all fake, all bought with the $50,000 Tyler had stolen from the car deposit. "This is a tragedy," the judge said, softly looking at me, Mr. Blackwood. "I know this is hard to hear. Whatever reality you are experiencing, it is clear that your family is trying to protect you." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The system was working exactly as it was designed, but it was being weaponized against me. The judge was a good person, trying to do the right thing based on the evidence in front of her. She didn't know the evidence was poison. If she signed that order, I would lose everything. My bank accounts would be frozen and turned over to Tyler. I would be escorted by bailiffs to a facility of Tyler's choosing, probably the cheapest one he could find, so he could pocket the difference. I would be medicated, silenced, and erased. Tyler looked up from his hands. He caught my eye. He didn't smile, that would be too risky, but his eyes were gleaming. He thought he had won. He thought the courtroom was his stage and he had delivered the monologue of his life. Wainwright leaned over to me, checking his watch. "Phase 3 is ready. Do you want to say anything before I destroy them?" I shook my head. "Let the judge ask, Judge." Harrison took off her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "This seems straightforward, given the medical testimony and the immediate threat of violence. I am inclined to grant the emergency temporary guardianship to Mr. Tyler Blackwood." "Wait," Tyler interrupted, standing up. "I just want to say one thing, Your Honor." The judge looked at him. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." "I don't want to control my father's life," Tyler said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I just want him safe. I want him to have the care he needs. I am willing to take on this burden because he is my dad, and I love him. No matter what he says or thinks, I love him." It was the cherry on top of the poisoned sundae, the perfect altruistic son. The judge smiled sadly, a sympathetic smile. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. It is rare to see such dedication." She picked up her pen. She hovered over the signature line of the order that would end my life as a free man. I looked at the clock. It was 10:15. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. "Your Honor," Wainwright stood up, his voice booming in the quiet courtroom. "Before you sign that order, my client would like to present a single piece of evidence." The judge frowned. "Mr. Wainwright, this is an emergency hearing. We usually rely on the filings." "Is this relevant?" "It is dispositive," Wainwright said. He walked to the center of the room. He didn't have a file, he didn't have a witness, he had a simple USB drive. "Dr. Evans claims he has treated my client for 3 years, Wainwright said. "Yet, we have insurance records indicating my client has never visited Dr. Evans's clinic. We have travel manifests showing my client was in Europe during the dates of these alleged appointments. But more importantly, Your Honor, we have video. Tyler asked, his voice tight. "Oh," Wainwright said, turning to face the gallery, looking directly at Brittany. "We have video from inside the Blackwood residence recorded last night, specifically during the time the alleged psychotic break took place." Brittany went rigid. Her eyes darted to Evans, who was suddenly looking very interested in his fingernails. "We object," Tyler's lawyer stammered. "We haven't seen this footage. It is rebuttal evidence," Wainwright said calmly. "Admissible to impeach the witness credibility. I believe the court will find it highly illuminating regarding the plaintiff's claim of loving concern." Judge Harrison lowered her pen. She looked at Tyler, then at Wainwright. "Play it," she said. Wainwright plugged the drive into the court's AV system. A large screen descended from the ceiling. Tyler and Brittany stared at it, paralyzed. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't the grainy footage of a security camera. It was high-definition audio and video recorded from the button camera on my collar. The angle was low, looking up at them. But the faces were clear. The voices were crystal clear. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the scene unfolded. They saw Evans mixing the sedative. They heard Brittany telling me to drink it. They heard Tyler say, "You are going to sleep for a long time, and when you wake up, we will be in charge." The judge sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. Then came the audio of the zip ties, the sound of me being bound, the conversation about the $50,000 payment to Evans. And finally, the moment Brittany went into the kitchen. There she whispered, "He is armed, now it is self-defense." The video ended, the screen went black, the silence in the courtroom was different now. It wasn't the silence of pity, it was the silence of a predator realizing it had walked into a cage. Judge Harrison looked at Dr. Evans. The doctor was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. He started to stand up, gathering his papers. "Sit down," the judge barked. Her voice echoed off the walls. "Dr. Evans, do not move." She turned her gaze to Tyler and Brittany. Tyler had sunk low in his chair, his face the color of ash. Brittany was shaking her head, muttering, "Oh, no." No to herself. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said to me, her tone completely changed. "I apologize." She turned to the bailiff. "Officer, secure the doors." "No one leaves this courtroom. I want the sheriff's deputies in here." "Now." Tyler stood up, panic taking over. "Your Honor, that video is manipulated, deep fake. He is good with computers. He made it up." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwood," the judge shouted, slamming her gavel down so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "You have perjured yourself. You have filed a false instrument. You have attempted to weaponize this court, to commit fraud and false imprisonment." She looked at Dr. Evans. "And you?" "Doctor, I am referring this immediately to the medical board and the district attorney. Falsifying medical records for financial gain is a felony." I looked at Tyler. He was trembling, looking at the exits, looking for a way out. But there was no way out. The doors were guarded, the judge was furious, and I was just sitting there watching the walls close in, but the show wasn't over yet. Wainwright cleared his throat. "Your Honor, there is one more thing, the $50,000 mentioned in the video. The payment for the fake records, we have tracked the source of those funds. They were obtained via credit card fraud, committed by Mrs. Brittany Blackwood against my client." Brittany let out a sob. A real one this time, loud and ugly. The judge looked at them with pure disgust. Motion denied. The guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. And Mr. Sterling, I suggest you distance yourself from your clients before you are dragged down with them. Deputies entered the courtroom. The sound of handcuffs clicking open was the only sound in the room. Tyler looked at me one last time, pleading with his eyes, begging for me to stop it, begging for the safety net. I just looked at him and checked my watch. It was time for Phase 4. The creditors were waiting outside. The courtroom was already in a state of shock following the revelation of the staged knife attack, but my lawyer Wainwright was not done. He was a man who believed in total warfare, and he had saved the most devastating ammunition for last. He stood in the center of the room, the silence heavy and expectant. "Your Honor," Wainwright said, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "while the previous footage proves the conspiracy to frame my client for violence, we have additional surveillance that speaks to the true motivation behind this urgency. It also speaks to the character of the petitioners in a way that I believe this court needs to see." Tyler was slumped in his chair, looking like a man who had just survived a firing squad, only to hear the guns reloading. Brittany was staring at the floor, her face pale. The judge nodded. "Grant the permission." "Proceed." "Mr. Wainwright." Wainwright signaled the technician. The screen flickered again, changing timestamps. This footage was from 3 days ago, the afternoon Tyler and Brittany had thrown their premature victory party at my house while I was checking into the hotel. The camera angle was from the kitchen, high up near the crown molding. It showed Brittany standing by the window, holding a glass of wine. She was on her phone, FaceTiming someone. She looked happy, triumphant. "Hey, baby," she cooed at the screen, her voice amplifying through the courtroom speakers. "It is done, the old man is gone. We are going to list the house tomorrow." Tyler looked up at the screen, confused. He recognized the moment. He had been in the living room popping champagne with his friends while his wife was in the kitchen. But he didn't know who she was talking to. The voice on the other end of the call was muffled but audible. "Yeah. And the money? 50,000 deposit already secured." Brittany laughed, sipping her wine. "And that is just the start. Once we sell it, we are looking at nearly $2 million. Tyler is going to pay off his debts, but I am skimming the top. Marcus, we are going to have enough to set us up." Tyler stiffened in his chair. The name Marcus hung in the air. I watched. My son's face, he knew a Marcus. It was the personal trainer he paid $200 an hour to train his wife on the screen. Brittany lowered her voice, but the high-gain microphone picked up every syllable. "Does he suspect anything?" the man on the phone asked. Brittany laughed, a cruel dismissal sound. "Tyler, please. He is so stressed about the loan sharks. He doesn't notice anything. He thinks he is the king of the world right now. Poor idiot. He thinks this is our fresh start." She rubbed her stomach, her hand resting gently on the slight bump that she had used to guilt me into submission just weeks ago. "What about the kid?" the man asked. "That is the best part." Brittany smiled a smile that was pure predation. "He is so excited to be a dad." "He has no idea, Marcus." "The timing was perfect. The dates line up. He thinks it is his. He is going to pay for everything. The best doctors, the best schools, and you and I are going to enjoy the lifestyle." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hard drives. Tyler slowly turned his head to look at his wife. It wasn't a look of anger. It was a look of total annihilation. On the screen, Brittany blew a kiss to the phone. "I have to go. The idiot is calling for a toast. I love you, baby. See you at the motel on Thursday." The video cut to black. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then a sound ripped through the room, a low guttural noise like an animal in a trap. It was Tyler. He stood up, his chair clattering backward to the floor. He looked at Brittany with eyes that were wide and wet, and filled with a horror so deep it looked like madness. "It is not mine," he whispered. His voice breaking. Brittany didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her hands gripping the table, her knuckles white as bone. She knew there was no lie that could save her now. The evidence wasn't just a recording. It was an execution of their marriage. "It is not mine!" Tyler screamed, lunging toward her. 2 bailiffs moved instantly, intercepting him, grabbing his arms, restraining him. Tyler fought them, thrashing and weeping, screaming at the woman he had stolen, for the woman he had betrayed his father for. "You told me it was mine. You let me pick out names. You let me build the nursery." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwood," the judge ordered, but her voice lacked the earlier sharpness. It was softer now, tinged with the pity one feels for a man watching his life burn to ash. Tyler collapsed into the bailiff's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The arrogance, the greed, the bravado. It was all gone. All that was left was a broken man who had sold his soul for a future that never existed. I sat there watching him, and for the first time I felt a pang of genuine sorrow, not for the son who tried to hurt me, but for the fool who had been played just as hard as I was. He was a villain, yes, but he was also a victim of a woman who was playing a game he didn't even know he was in. Brittany finally spoke, her voice trembling but defiant. "It doesn't matter, Tyler. You are broke. You are going to jail. Anyway. What does it matter whose baby it is? At least this one will have a father who isn't a loser." The cruelty of her words sucked the air out of the room. Judge Harrison had heard enough. She slammed her gavel down, a sound of finality that made everyone jump. "Enough," she barked. "This court has seen enough." She looked at the lawyers, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. This court finds absolutely no evidence of incapacity on the part of Conrad Blackwood. In fact, he seems to be the only rational person in this entire family. She turned her gaze to the defense table. However, I am finding significant evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, and perjury. Mr. Tyler Blackwood, Mrs. Brittany Blackwood, and Dr. Evans, you are remanded into custody, pending a full investigation by the District Attorney's Office. She pointed a finger at Dr. Evans. And you, sir, I am recommending an immediate suspension of your medical license. Falsifying a diagnosis for financial gain is a disgrace to your profession. Evans slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. The judge looked at Tyler, who was still weeping quietly. Mr. Blackwood, I suggest you get a paternity test, although based on the evidence, I think you can save your money. She banged the gavel one last time. Court is adjourned. The deputies moved in handcuffs, clicking. Dr. Evans was the first to be shackled, then Brittany. She held her head high, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, but as the metal cuffs locked around her wrists, I saw her lip quiver. She looked at me for the first time since the video played. Conrad, she said, her voice losing its edge, becoming small and scared. Please, I am pregnant. You can't let them take me to jail. I stood up, gathering my papers. I looked at her, the woman who had poisoned my son's mind, the woman who had laughed about stealing my house. I didn't send you to jail, Brittany, I said calmly. You drove yourself there and you paid for the gas with my credit card. I turned to Tyler. He was being cuffed, his hands behind his back. He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. He looked like a child who had woken up from a nightmare, only to find the monster was real, Dad. He choked out. I didn't know about the baby. I swear I didn't know. I know you didn't. I said, my voice soft. But you knew about the fraud. You knew about the knife. You knew about the plan to lock me away. The fact that she betrayed you doesn't change the fact that you betrayed me. I walked past them, past the lawyers, past the stunned gallery. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway where the air was cool and quiet. Behind me, I heard the heavy wooden doors swing shut, sealing my family inside their fate. I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The rain had cleared and the sun was breaking through the clouds. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the taste of freedom. It was done. The house was safe. The money was safe, and the truth was out. But as I stood there, I saw a group of men getting off the elevator. They weren't police. They were wearing cheap suits and looking around with shark-like intensity. I recognized one of them from the file I had on Tyler's debts. It was an associate of Vinny the bookie. They were here for Tyler. They were here for the money he didn't have. I checked my watch. It was noon. The deadline had passed. I adjusted my tie and walked toward the elevator, passing the loan sharks without a glance. They didn't know who I was. They didn't care. They were just the cleanup crew for a disaster that had been years in the making. My son was going to prison, but he was safer there than he would be on the street. For now, at least, I had saved his life by putting him in a cage. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, severing the connection to my past life. I was Conrad Blackwood, and for the first time in a long time, I had a future to plan. I stood across the street from the county courthouse, watching the heavy brass doors swing open from the safety of a tinted town car I had hired for the afternoon. It had been 4 hours since the arraignment. Tyler and Brittany had managed to post bail using a predatory bondsman who took the title to Brittany's jewelry collection as collateral. They walked out into the harsh afternoon sunlight, blinking like moles dragged out of a tunnel. They looked exhausted, their clothes rumpled from the holding cell, their dignity left somewhere on the booking room floor. They thought the worst was over. They thought they could go home, regroup, and come up with a new lie to spin. But they didn't realize that the world outside that courtroom was far more unforgiving than the judge inside. And I had made sure the welcoming committee was ready. Waiting at the bottom of the concrete steps was not a friendly face. It was Mr. Liu, the developer, who had almost bought my house. Standing next to him were two men who looked like they were carved out of granite, private security contractors with thick necks and very little patience. Mr. Liu was not a man who took a $50,000 loss lightly. He wasn't waiting for the legal system to reimburse him. He was there to collect. I watched as Tyler froze halfway down the steps. He saw Liu and grabbed Brittany's arm, trying to steer her toward the side exit, but Liu moved fast, cutting them off. Mr. Blackwood. Liu's voice carried across the plaza, sharp and demanding. You have something of mine. Tyler held up his hands, a gesture of surrender that was becoming his trademark. Look, Mr. Liu, I don't have the cash right now. The police seized everything as evidence. My accounts are frozen. That is not my problem, Liu said, stepping closer into Tyler's personal space. You stole $50,000 from me. You committed wire fraud. I spoke to the district attorney. He said I have to wait for restitution, but I am a businessman and I don't like waiting. Tyler was sweating now, looking around for a police officer, but the deputies by the door were busy ignoring him. They knew a civil dispute when they saw one, and they had no sympathy for the man who tried to frame his father. I need my money, Liu said. His eyes dropped to Tyler's wrist, to the vintage Rolex Daytona Tyler was wearing. It was a gift I had given him for his graduation, worth about $25,000. Tyler followed his gaze and instinctively covered the watch. Give it to me, Liu demanded, extending his hand. No, Tyler stammered. This is my dad's. It is an heirloom. You stole your dad's house, Liu snapped. You don't get to play the sentimental card. Give me the watch and give me the keys to that sedan you drove here yesterday, or my associates here will escort you back inside, and we can add grand larceny to your charge sheet. Tyler looked at the two granite statues behind Liu. He looked at the watch. He looked at his freedom. With trembling fingers, he unclasped the Rolex and dropped it into Liu's palm. Then he fished the keys to his 3-year-old BMW out of his pocket. This doesn't cover it, Liu said, pocketing the watch. But it is a start. You have 48 hours to find the rest. Or I will garnish your wages for the rest of your miserable life. Liu signaled to one of his men, who snatched the car keys. The trio walked away toward the parking lot, leaving Tyler standing on the sidewalk, stripped of his status symbol and his transportation. Brittany, who had been cowering behind Tyler, suddenly seemed to remember she had an escape route. She didn't care about Tyler's watch or his car. She only cared about herself. I am leaving, she hissed at Tyler, pushing past him. I am not staying here to be harassed by your creditors. I am going to my mom's. She started walking briskly toward the north side of the lot, where she had parked her white Range Rover the day before. It was her pride and joy, the only thing she owned that was actually in her name. Or so she thought. I leaned forward in the back seat of my town car, watching the realization hit her in real time. Brittany reached the spot where she had parked. She stopped. She spun around, looking left and right, scanning the rows of cars, confusion morphing into panic. She clicked the panic button on her key fob, hoping to hear the horn, expecting lights to flash. Silence. The parking spot was empty. She started running, her heels clicking frantically on the asphalt, checking the next row and the next, screaming into the air. My car. Where is my car? Someone stole my car. It wasn't stolen, I whispered to myself, taking a sip of sparkling water. It was repossessed 3 hours ago while they were being processed. I had made a phone call to the financing company that held the note on the Range Rover. I had co-signed for that loan 2 years ago, when Brittany claimed she needed a safe vehicle for her real estate business, a business that never materialized. I called the risk management department and informed them that the primary borrower had just been arrested for felony fraud, and that the income statements on the original application, which I had guaranteed, were falsified. I formally revoked my guarantee and provided them with the location of the vehicle. Repossession agents are very efficient, especially when they know the guarantor is cooperating. Tyler limped over to where Brittany was standing, screaming at a parking attendant. "It is gone!" Brittany shrieked, turning on Tyler. "They took it. My Range Rover is gone. How are we supposed to leave? How are we supposed to go anywhere?" Tyler looked at the empty spot. Then he looked at me across the street. He couldn't see me through the tinted glass, but he knew. He knew my signature was on that loan. He knew I was the one who pulled the plug. They stood there in the middle of the city sidewalk, two people who had woken up yesterday thinking they were millionaires. Now they were standing in the cold wind, with no house, no cars, no money, and no friends. Tyler checked his pockets. He pulled out his wallet, opening it to find it empty. The police had taken his cash as evidence of the fraud. The credit cards were maxed out or canceled. He looked at Brittany, expecting her to fix it, to come up with a plan. But Brittany was done with plans. She was done with him. "Call an Uber," she snapped, wiping mascara from her cheeks. "I can't," Tyler whispered, staring at his phone. "My account is locked. The bank froze everything because of the investigation." Brittany let out a scream of pure frustration, a sound that made passers-by stop and stare. She threw her purse onto the ground, kicking it. "We are walking," she yelled, starting to stomp down the street in her expensive heels. "We are walking because you are a loser, Tyler. You are a broke, pathetic loser." Tyler picked up her purse, dusting it off like a servant. He looked broken, hollowed out. He trailed after her, keeping a few paces back, afraid to get too close. I watched them turn the corner, disappearing into the gray city crowds. They looked like refugees from a life they never really earned. They were walking toward a future of bus stops and court dates of public defenders and judgment. I tapped the partition glass. "We can go now," I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a sense of order being restored. Gravity was working again. The people who leaped off the cliff were finally hitting the ground. But I wasn't done yet. Tyler still had one hope left, one tiny flicker of light he was clinging to. He thought that even if he went to prison, even if he lost the house, he still had the trust fund from his mother. He thought that $2 million was waiting for him at the end of the rainbow, untouchable and safe. He didn't know that the rainbow had been canceled. I pulled out the file marked Blackwood Family Trust. The final payoff was waiting on my desk, and it was going to cost him a lot more than a car ride. Tyler looked like a man who had walked through a hurricane. He stood in the doorway of my hotel suite, shivering even though the room was warm. His designer suit was stained with sweat and street grime. His hair was matted, and his eyes were wild with the desperate manic energy of a junkie looking for a fix. I had let him in because I knew this moment was coming. I knew he had one card left to play, one final delusion to cling to. He had lost the house, he had lost the car, he had lost his wife, and his freedom was hanging by a thread, but he still believed in the myth of the Blackwood family. "Trust, Dad," he rasped, his voice cracking. He walked further into the room, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "I know. I messed up. I know I did terrible things. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it." He fell to his knees on the plush carpet right in front of the chair where I sat. It was a pathetic, theatrical gesture, but I saw the calculation behind it. He was trying to summon the ghost of the little boy I used to protect. "I just need help, Dad. Real help. I am drowning. Vinny is going to kill me. The lawyers say I am looking at 10 years. You have to help me, not with your money. I know you won't give me that. But Mom's money, the trust." There it was, the entitlement lurking beneath the begging. "Mom told me before she died," he said, tears streaming down his face. "She told me she set aside money for me. She said it was for my future, for when I needed it most, Dad. I need it now. I need to pay Vinny. I need a real lawyer. This is what it is for, right? To save me." I looked at him calmly, sipping my sparkling water. He was right about one thing. His mother had left money, a lot of it. She had been the one who inherited the initial capital that I grew into a fortune. She had wanted to ensure her son was always taken care of, but she also knew him better than he knew himself. I reached for the thick leather-bound file on the table next to me. I opened it slowly, smoothing out the pages. The sound of the paper crinkling was the only noise in the room. "You are right, Tyler," I said softly. "Your mother did leave a trust. She wanted you to have security. She wanted you to have a life free from worry." Tyler's head snapped up. Hope, fierce and blinding, flooded his eyes. "How much?" he whispered. $2.2 million, I said. Tyler gasped. He made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. 2 million. It was more than he had imagined. It was enough to pay Vinny, enough to hire the best criminal defense team in the state, enough to start over in a country without extradition. "Treaties, oh thank God," he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "Thank God. Dad, please just transfer it. I will sign whatever you want. I will disappear. You will never see me again. Just give me the money." I watched him cry. Tears of relief, tears of greed. He thought he had won again. He thought the safety net had caught him one last time. "But there is a condition," I said. Tyler looked up, wiping his eyes. "A condition." I turned the folder around and slid it across the coffee table toward him, read. Clause 4, Section A. Tyler scrambled forward, grabbing the document with trembling fingers. He scanned the legal jargon, his eyes darting back and forth, trying to find the catch. "Read it out loud," I commanded. Tyler swallowed hard. He cleared his throat and began to read, his voice shaking. "In the event that the beneficiary Tyler Blackwood engages in any act of moral turpitude, including but not limited to gambling, fraud, or theft." He stopped. He looked at me, fear creeping back into his expression. "Keep reading," I said. "Or if the beneficiary attempts to cause physical, mental, or financial harm to the trustee. Conrad Blackwood." He stopped again. His hands were trembling so hard the paper was rattling. "Finish it, Tyler. Then the entirety of the trust corpus and all accumulated interest shall be immediately and irrevocably forfeited." "And where does it go, Tyler? Where does the money go?" Tyler looked at the last line of the paragraph. He whispered the words like a death sentence. "Shall be donated in full to the National Veterans Association for the support of wounded soldiers." He dropped the paper as if it were burning. "No," he whispered. "Mom wouldn't do that. She wouldn't." "She did," I said, closing the file. "She knew about your gambling. Tyler, even back then, she knew you had a darkness in you. She made me promise that I would only give you this money if you became the man she hoped you would be. She made me the executor of her will and the guardian of her legacy." I picked up my iPad and unlocked the screen. I opened the banking app for the trust account. Tyler saw the screen. He saw the balance, $2,200,000. "Dad." "Don't," he begged, scrambling to his feet, reaching out as if he could grab the numbers through the air. "Please. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was the debt. It was the pressure. I am your son. You tried to have me lobotomized." I said, my voice cold as ice. "You hired a criminal to forge medical records. You planted a knife in my hand so the police would shoot me. You didn't just try to hurt me, Tyler. You tried to erase me." I tapped the screen, bringing up the transfer option. The recipient was already saved, National Veterans Association. "Dad. Please, I will change. I will go to rehab. I will do anything." "Don't do this. It is my life. It was your life," I corrected. "But you gambled it away. You bet on my death, and you lost." I looked him in the eye, holding his gaze. "This is for Mom," I said, and then I pressed. "Confirm." The screen refreshed. A little green checkmark appeared. Transfer complete, balance 0. Tyler stared at the iPad. He stared at the 0. He let out a scream that wasn't human. It was the sound of a soul breaking. It was the sound of a man watching his future evaporate into the digital ether. He lunged for the tablet, but he was too weak, too broken. He collapsed onto the floor, curling into a fetal position, sobbing violently, hitting the carpet with his fists. "No, no," he wailed over and over again. "It is gone. It is all gone." I stood up and walked over to him, looking down at the heap of expensive fabric and wasted potential. $2 million. Tyler, it could have bought you a house, a business, a lifetime of security. But you got greedy, you wanted it all, and you wanted it. Now. I picked up the file and the iPad. "You have 24 hours to find a public defender," I said, walking toward the bedroom door. "And Tyler, if Vinny comes looking for you, tell him the bank is closed, permanently." I went into the bedroom and closed the door, locking it behind me. I could still hear him sobbing in the living room, a broken man mourning the loss of a fortune he never earned. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the buildings. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The burden of the secret, the burden of the test was finally gone. I had kept my promise to my wife, I had protected her legacy, and I had taught our son the only lesson he was ever going to learn. Money was doing good work now. It was helping people who had actually fought for their lives, not people who tried to steal them. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. It was done, but as I stood there watching the lights of the city flicker on, I knew. There was one last loose end. The alliance between Tyler and Brittany had shattered, but the shrapnel was still flying. They were both facing prison, but they were also facing each other. And hate is a powerful motivator. Tyler was broken, but Brittany was vicious, and she was still out on bail. I checked the security feed on my phone. Brittany was not at her mother's house. The GPS tracker I had slipped into her purse when she wasn't looking showed her moving fast, heading toward the one place she thought she could still salvage something. She was heading to the courthouse not to turn herself in but to file a countersuit. She was going to try to claim that Tyler had coerced her, that she was the victim of a controlling husband. She was going to try. She was. To flip on him, to save herself. I smiled. Let them fight. Let them tear each other apart in the public square. I had the popcorn ready, and the front row seat was reserved. I picked up the phone and called Wainwright. Did the transfer go through? He asked. Every penny, I said. And Wainwright sent a press release to the local paper. Let them know that the Blackwood family has just made a record-breaking donation to the Veterans Association. I want it on the front page tomorrow morning. Why? Wainwright asked, chuckling. Because I said, watching the city lights. I want Brittany to read about where her Porsche money went while she is sitting in the waiting room of the public defender's office. I hung up and poured myself another drink. The night was young and the final act was just beginning. The steps of the King County Courthouse are wide and imposing, made of gray stone that has absorbed a century of misery and conflict. I sat in the back of my private car, parked just down the street, watching the final act of my family's tragedy unfold. It was inevitable physics, really. When you strip away the money, the lies, and the delusions, all that is left is the raw, ugly truth, and for Tyler and Brittany, the truth was about to get violent. Brittany was standing near the entrance, frantic, screaming into her phone, presumably yelling at a lawyer who wouldn't take her case without a retainer. She looked nothing like the polished socialite she pretended to be. Her hair was wild, her designer dress was wrinkled, and her face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She had just found out about the trust fund. The news of the donation had hit the local digital wire 10 minutes ago, and I knew she had seen it. Tyler arrived a moment later. He had run all the way from the hotel, his chest heaving, sweat soaking through his ruined suit. He looked like a madman, his eyes bloodshot and wide. He spotted Brittany and charged toward her, not with love, not with hope, but with the desperation of a man who has realized he is the punchline to a very expensive joke. He reached her, grabbing her arm, spinning her around. I could hear them from the car. even through the closed windows, their voices carrying over the evening traffic. "You knew," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You knew about the money! You knew! I lost it all!" Brittany shoved him back, her face contorted with disgust. "Don't touch me, you loser! Get away from me!" Tyler stumbled but regained his footing. "You lied to me about everything. The baby, the house, Marcus, you played me." Brittany laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that seemed to cut through the noise of the city. "Played you, Tyler. You played yourself. Look at you. You are pathetic. You are a 32-year-old man who has never achieved a single thing in his life without his daddy holding his hand. And now daddy cut you off, and you are nothing." Tyler flinched as if she had slapped him. "I did it for us. I sold the house for you, for the car, for the life you wanted, for me," Brittany scoffed, stepping closer to him, invading his space, poking him in the chest with a manicured finger. "You did it because you are weak. You did it because you are a gambler and a fraud. I just wanted security. I wanted a man who could provide, not a mama's boy who has to steal from his senile father to buy me a purse. You are useless, Tyler. You have always been useless. That is why I slept with Marcus. That is why I needed a real man, because living with you is like living with a child." The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic, useless. Mama's boy, the insults struck the very core of Tyler's insecurity. The fracture points I had seen in him since he was a teenager, but had tried to cover with money and support. Now exposed to the air, they shattered him. Something snapped in Tyler. I saw it happen. His posture changed. The slump of defeat vanished, replaced by a rigid, terrifying tension. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just lunged. He tackled her right there on the concrete steps of the courthouse. It wasn't a fight. It was a mauling. They went down in a tangle of limbs and expensive fabric rolling down the stairs. Tyler was screaming unintelligible sounds, hitting out blindly, fueled by the rage of a man who has lost his soul. Brittany shrieked, scratching at his face, fighting for her life. It was grotesque. It was primal. It was the absolute nadir of dignity. Passers-by stopped in horror. People pulled out phones, screaming for them to stop. Security guards from the courthouse entrance rushed down the stairs, batons drawn, shouting orders that neither Tyler nor Brittany could hear, over the roar of their own hatred. "Off her!" "One!" Guard yelled, grabbing Tyler by the collar and hauling him backward. Tyler flailed, swinging wild punches, hitting the guard in the jaw. That was a mistake. Assaulting a court officer is a felony that carries a mandatory sentence. More officers swarmed out of the building. Police cruisers that had been parked nearby flashed their lights, sirens chirping loudly. The scene descended into chaos. Brittany was sitting on the steps, her dress torn, crying hysterically, pointing a shaking finger at Tyler. "He tried to kill me. He is crazy. Arrest him." The officers slammed Tyler onto the hood of a cruiser, pinning him down. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was just sobbing, his face pressed against the cold metal, defeated and broken. They cuffed his hands behind his back, tight and efficient. Another officer grabbed Brittany, trying to calm her down, but she pushed him away, screaming insults, telling them they were incompetent, that they should be arresting me, not her. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," the officer warned. "Don't touch me!" she shrieked, slapping the officer's hand away. That was her mistake. Within seconds, she was spun around and cuffed next to her husband. Two criminals bound by law and now by handcuffs, standing side by side in the wreckage of their own making. I watched it all through the tinted glass. My face was reflected in the window, expressionless, calm. A father should feel heartbreak. Seeing his son in handcuffs, he should feel an urge to run out there to hire a lawyer to pay the bail to fix it. But I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt relief, deep, washing relief. It was the feeling of a surgeon who has just cut out a gangrenous limb. It hurts to lose a part of yourself, but you know that if you didn't cut it, the rot would have killed you. Tyler wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger. A man consumed by greed and weakness, and Brittany, she was the infection that had taken hold. I watched as the officers shoved them into the back of separate patrol cars. Tyler looked up as his head was pushed down, and for a second, his eyes scanned the street. It was almost as if he knew I was there watching him. He looked lost, terrified, a child who had burned down the school and was waiting for the principal. But the principal wasn't coming. The bank was closed. The safety net was gone. I signaled to my driver. Move on. As the car merged into traffic, leaving the flashing lights and the shouting behind, I didn't look back, I didn't cry. I opened my folder and made a note next to Tyler's name. Asset, liquidated liability, removed. It sounds cold, I know. But warmth had almost cost me my life. Coldness was what saved me. And right now, sitting in the quiet luxury of my car, I felt safer than I had in years. The tumor was gone. The healing could finally begin, but there was still the matter of the aftermath. Prison changes people. Sometimes it breaks them, sometimes it hardens them. I didn't know what it would do to Tyler, but I knew one thing for sure: he would have a lot of time to think about the $2 million he gave away for a chance to kill his father. And that thought alone was a punishment, worse than any cell. I took out my phone and dialed Wainwright's number. "They are in custody," I said, my voice steady. "Hood," Wainwright replied. "Do you want me to arrange legal representation for them?" I paused, looking at the city lights blurring past. "No," I said. "Let them use the public defender. They need to learn how the real world works, and Wainwright ensure the restraining order is filed first thing tomorrow morning. I don't want them contacting me from jail." "Understood, Conrad. And the house?" "Sell it," I said immediately. "I don't want to step foot in it again. Too many ghosts. Put the proceeds into the Veterans Fund. The whole thing, wipe the slate clean." I hung up the phone and closed my eyes for the first time in days, feeling a true restful sleep approaching. The nightmare was over. My son was gone, but I was still here, and I had a lot of living left to do. 3 months is a long time in the real world. Seasons change, markets fluctuate, and people move on, but in prison time stands still, it stagnates. It rots. 3 months is 90 days of staring at concrete walls and thinking about every mistake that led you there. I was sitting in the lounge of the private airport terminal in Seattle, watching the rain streak against the floor, to ceiling glass, waiting for my flight to Zurich. I had liquidated the remaining assets, closed the local accounts, and severed the last physical ties to the city that had been my home for 40 years. The Victorian house was sold, the proceeds already distributed to the veterans, as promised. My phone vibrated on the leather armrest. It was a number I didn't recognize with a local area code. I usually ignored unknown numbers, but something, an instinct honed by years of chasing fugitives, made me pick it up. I pressed answer and put the phone to my ear. There was a mechanical click, followed by a recorded voice, devoid of humanity. "This is a prepaid call from an inmate at the King County Correctional Facility. To accept charges, press 1. I stared at the runway, watching a jet taxi into position. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have hung up, I should have hung up. It would have been the clean break, the final punctuation mark on a sentence I finished writing weeks ago. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to know if 3 months of cold steel and bad food had changed him. I wanted to know if the boy I raised was still in there somewhere, buried under the debris of the man he became. I pressed 1. There was a burst of static, the background noise of 100 men shouting echoing in a large metal room, and then a voice, small and brokenwood. It was Tyler, but it sounded like a ghost of him. The arrogance was gone. The smooth salesman tone was gone. It was the voice of a child who had scraped his knee and wanted his father to make it stop hurting. "Hello, Tyler," I said, my voice neutral, calm. "Dad, please don't hang up." He rushed the words, stumbling over them, desperate. "I only have 5 minutes. I used my commissary trade to get this slot. Please, just listen. I am listening." I heard him take a ragged breath. A sound that was half sob, half gasp. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry, Dad. You have to believe me. It is a nightmare in here. You have no idea. I am scared all the time. I can't sleep, I can't eat. They took my shoes, Dad. They took everything. I took a sip of my espresso, listening to the litany of his misery. It should have broken my heart. A father should feel a physical pain hearing his son in such distress. But all I felt was a distant clinical detachment. I was observing a specimen under a microscope. I know I messed up." Tyler continued, his voice rising in pitch, becoming frantic. "But it wasn't all me. It was Brittany. She twisted me, Dad. She got in my head. She told me you were holding us back. She told me we deserved the money. I was weak. I know I was weak. But she was the one who pushed it. She was the one who found the doctor. She was the one who planned the psych ward thing. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to make her happy." There it was, the pivot. The deflection. Even now, sitting in a cell wearing a jumpsuit that wasn't his, he couldn't take full ownership. He was painting himself as the victim of a femme fatale, rewriting history to make himself the passenger in his own car crash. "She didn't make you gamble." "Tyler," I said softly, cutting through his hysteria, "Brittany didn't force you to sit at a blackjack table and lose $60,000. She didn't force you to forge my signature on the power of attorney 5 years ago. And she certainly didn't force you to tie my hands with zip ties, but she manipulated me," he cried. He was weeping openly now, the sound distorted by the phone line. "She lied about the baby. Dad. She lied about everything. If I had known the baby wasn't mine, I never would have done it. I did it for my family. I did it to be a good father. You did it because you were greedy," I corrected him. My voice wasn't angry, it was just factual, cold, hard data. "You did it because you wanted a shortcut. You wanted the lifestyle without the work. You wanted the Porsche without the payments. And when the walls closed in, you didn't look for a job. You looked for a weapon. You looked at me, and you didn't see a father. You saw a piggy bank to be smashed open." "Dad, please," he begged. "Ignore the past. I can change. I have changed. I am going to testify against her. The DA offered me a deal if I testify about the doctor and Brittany's role. But I need a lawyer, Dad, a real one. The public defender doesn't care. If you could just help me with the legal fees, I promise I will pay you back. I will work the rest of my life to pay you back." I closed my eyes, rubbing the bridge of my nose. He still didn't get it. He was still trying to negotiate. He was still trying to find the angle. "Tyler," I said, opening my eyes and looking at the gray sky. "Listen to me very carefully." I paused, letting the silence stretch across the line. "You are not a victim. You were not tricked. You are a 32-year-old man who made a series of choices. You chose the gambling. You chose the debt. You chose the wife. And you chose to betray the one person who would have walked through fire for you. But Dad, no." "Tyler." I interrupted, my voice hardening into stone. "You are not calling me because you are sorry. You are calling me because you are uncomfortable. You are calling me because you want a check. You want me to fix it. Just like I fixed your rent. Just like I fixed your car payments. Just like I fixed your credit card bills for 3 years. I heard him choke back a sob. "I am not fixing this," I said. "I am not paying for a lawyer. I am not sending money to your commissary account. And I am not coming to visit Dad. Please, I am your son. You were my son," I said. "The man on this phone is a stranger who tried to erase me." The background noise in the prison seemed to get louder. A buzzer sounded, a harsh grinding noise marking the end of the rotation. "I have to go," Tyler said, panic rising in his voice. "The guards are coming. Dad, please don't leave me here. I will die in here." "You won't die, Tyler," I said. "You will live and you will have a lot of time to think. And maybe, just maybe, when you get out in 8 or 10 years, You will be a man who understands the value of earning something instead of stealing it. I moved the phone away from my ear and, "Dad, please," I pressed, the red button ending the call. The silence in the lounge rushed back and wrapping around me like a blanket. I stared at the phone screen for a long moment. Then I opened the settings menu. I found the number that had just called me and I blocked it. Then I went into my contacts and found Tyler's old cell number. I blocked that too. I put the phone down and picked up my espresso. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. People talk about unconditional love as if it is a virtue, but unconditional love without boundaries is just enablement. It is a weakness that predators exploit, even if those predators share your DNA. I had loved Tyler enough to let him hit the bottom. I had loved him enough to let him face the consequences of his own soul. It felt cold, yes. It felt brutal. But surgery is brutal, amputation is brutal. Sometimes you have to cut away the rot to save the life, and I had chosen to save my own life. I stood up, smoothing the front of my jacket. The boarding call for the flight to Zurich chimed. Over the intercom, gentle and inviting, I picked up my carry-on bag and walked toward the gate. I didn't look back at the phone. I didn't think about the cell or the tears or the pleas. My son had made his bed, now he had to sleep in it, and I had a plane to catch. The ink was barely dry on the final papers when I handed the keys to the Victorian house over to the real estate agent. For the last time, I had liquidated my life estate interest, officially severing the legal tether that bound me to that piece of land. The proceeds from the physical sale of the property had gone to the Veterans Association, as promised. But my personal portfolio, the wealth I had built over 40 years of forensic accounting, was untouched and liquid. For decades, that money had sat in diversified accounts, growing quietly. While I lived a life of frugality, I had lived that way, to teach my son the value of $1, to show him that character matters more than cash. But the lesson had failed, and the student was now sitting in a 6x8 cell wearing state-issued orange. So I decided to stop teaching and start living. I bought a one-way ticket to Zurich first class. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a pilgrimage. My late wife Martha had a list, a leather-bound journal she kept in her nightstand filled with the places she wanted to see before she died. The Amalfi Coast, the temples of Kyoto, the vineyards of Bordeaux, the fjords of Norway. We never went, we were always waiting for the right time, waiting for Tyler to settle down, waiting for retirement. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was taking Martha with me in my heart, and I was going to see it all for both of us 6 months later. I found myself sitting on the teak deck of a private charter yacht off the coast of Santorini. The Aegean Sea was a blue so deep it looked like ink, and the sun was warm on my face. I wasn't wearing a cardigan or a sensible rain jacket. I was wearing linen and sunglasses, looking less like a retired bookkeeper and more like the man Ivanhoe had always been underneath the camouflage. I wasn't alone. Around the table sat a group of people I had met in a cooking class in Florence 3 weeks prior. There was Edward, a retired history professor from Oxford, who could quote Homer by memory but couldn't chop an onion to save his life. And there was Sarah, a former nurse from Toronto, who had sold her house to travel the world after her husband passed. They didn't know I was a millionaire. They didn't know about the forensic accounting, or the federal investigations, or the son in prison. To them, I was just Conrad, a man who knew a lot about numbers and appreciated a good scotch. We sat there sharing a bottle of local wine and a platter of olives and cheese, laughing about the time Edward tried to order dinner in Italian and accidentally insulted the waiter's mother. "It is funny, Conrad," Edward said, swirling his wine. "You seem lighter than when we first met in Italy. You looked like you were carrying a heavy backpack." "Now you look free." "I am free," I said, smiling. I dropped the backpack. We didn't talk about stock options or real estate values. We didn't try to impress each other with brand names or status symbols. We talked about art. We talked about history. We talked about the way the light hit the water. It was the most honest conversation I had engaged in for 20 years. For so long, my interactions had been transactional. Tyler wanted money. Brittany wanted status. Even my neighbors back in Seattle wanted to know why I didn't mow my lawn more often. These people just wanted my company. They valued my stories, not my net worth. I looked at Sarah laughing at one of Edward's jokes. Her eyes were crinkled at the corners, full of genuine joy. She wasn't looking for a sponsor, she was looking for a friend. It occurred to me that this was what wealth was actually for. It wasn't for buying Porsches or impressing strangers. It was for buying freedom. It was for buying the time to sit on a boat in the middle of the ocean and laugh with people who didn't know your last name. My phone buzzed on the table next to my wine glass. It was a soft, unobtrusive sound. I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from my private bank in Zurich, quarterly dividend deposit. Received $150,000. I looked at the number. It was more money than Tyler had tried to steal in his entire life. It was enough to buy a small house, enough to pay off a loan shark 3 times over, and it had just appeared in my account while I was eating an olive. I swiped the notification away without breaking eye contact with my friends. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noticing my glance. "Everything is perfect," I said. "I just got a reminder that life goes on." I raised my glass, making a silent toast to Martha. I wished she could feel the wind and taste the wine, but in a way I knew she was there. She would have liked Edward and Sarah. She would have loved the blue water. I thought about Tyler sitting in his cell, probably staring at a cinder block wall, wondering where it all went wrong. He was likely blaming me, blaming the system, blaming bad luck. He would never understand that the prison he was in wasn't built of bars. It was built of want. He wanted what he didn't earn. And that desire was a cage tighter than any jail. I was free, not because I had money, but because I no longer needed to protect anyone from themselves. I had cut the anchor. And for the first time in my life, I was drifting exactly where I wanted to go. Edward raised his glass. "To the next port, to the next port," I repeated. The yacht turned slowly, cutting through the waves, heading toward the horizon. I took a sip of wine and closed my eyes, listening to the sound of the water and the laughter of my friends. The past was a closed book. The future was an open map, and I had plenty of fuel in the tank. The package arrived while we were docked in Naples, forwarded by Wainwright's office, along with the final dissolution papers for the stateside assets. Inside the thick envelope was a smaller one, hand, written on cheap lined paper. The return address was a halfway house in Seattle. Brittany was out on bail, awaiting sentencing. Her high-powered life reduced to a shared room and a curfew. I sat on the stern of the boat. The letter heavy in my hand, I opened it. The handwriting was frantic, the ink smeared in places as if she had been crying or sweating while she wrote, "Conrad, please, I know you hate me. I know I messed up, but I am alone. The baby is coming in 2 months. I have no money. Tyler is gone. My parents won't speak to me. You are the only family this child has. Even if he isn't blood, he deserves a chance. He deserves a grandfather. Please just help us get started. Just a small apartment. That is all I ask." I read it twice, analyzing it like I used to analyze tax returns, searching for the truth hidden in the margins. It wasn't a plea for redemption. It was a plea for a resource. She didn't want a grandfather for her child. She wanted a wallet. She was using an innocent life as a lever, just like she used Tyler, just like she tried to use me. She hadn't changed. She was just desperate. And desperation is not the same thing as repentance. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel the urge to call her, to lecture her, or even to pity her. I just felt a profound sense of closure. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was demolished, and the rubble had been swept away. I took a silver lighter from my pocket, the flame flickering in the sea breeze. I held the corner of the letter to the fire, watching the cheap paper curl and blacken. The words, family and help, turned to ash, dissolving into the wind, scattering over the deep blue water of the Mediterranean. I watched the last ember die out, dusting the soot from my fingers. It was the final transaction. The last debt canceled. Edward called out from the bow, asking if I was ready for lunch. The smell of grilled fish and lemon drifted back to me, a promise of a good meal and good company. I stood up, turning my back on the wake of the ship, on the ashes on. The past I spent my whole life building a roof for others, sacrificing my own comfort to keep them dry now. It is time I build peace for myself, and that peace has no room for traitors. Many of us are taught that family is everything, that we must sacrifice endlessly for our children. But my story proves that unconditional love without boundaries is just a recipe for disaster. By protecting my son from every consequence, I didn't help him. I crippled him. I learned that true wealth isn't the number in your bank account, but the freedom to wake up without fear or obligation. You cannot buy respect, and you cannot save people who view you only as a resource. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let them fall. If you believe that dignity is worth more than any inheritance, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, would you have burned the letter, or would you have given them one last chance?